was pretty
Wiseman.
big bust. Right?
Yeah, that's true. You're right about that. You're right.
Nice enough to join us now, NBA insider for Forbes and the Sporting News, Evan Sidery. Evan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, especially on a Friday before the big holiday. Would you be willing to share with us? We were just talking about drafts and prospects. Who was an NBA player that you missed on? Like, I thought Derek Williams was going to be great. Drapes had Adam Morrison. Was there a guy that you thought, oh, this guy's going to be a great player, and for whatever reason, it never quite worked out for him?
Yeah, I was really high on Josh Jackson when he came out in the draft.
Yeah.
And he was a guy like a Swiss Army knife that kind of reminded me of Draymond Green type, but super, super athletic. He was a guy I thought was going to fit really well with the Phoenix Suns, really mesh with Devin Booker, number 4 overall pick that year in the draft. I mean, he was out of the league in 3 years, though. So that really goes to show you this is really all a crapshoot. Your scouting department just got a hit on it.
Right.
Right. You just got to hit. You know, one guy we were just talking about is Zach Edey. Where do you stand on Zach Edey? Can he be a contributor in the NBA?
Yeah, I think so. He reminds me a lot. I'd compare him to Ivica Zubac for the Clippers. I think he's a more consistent offensive version of him. I think a player like him in today's league can at least give you 20 minutes off the bench. And he's been getting buzz really in the lottery. I think at this point, I'd be pretty surprised if he falls outside, let's say, like the late lottery, or maybe he slips just right outside of it in that 16, 17 range. But Edey, his production at Purdue, I mean, back-to-back National Player of the Year, great defender. Obviously, his mobility is going to be a question mark on the next level, but you can't deny his production. I think as a backup center in the NBA, I think he really could carve out a role for himself.
Talking with Evan Sidery here as we get ready for the NBA draft, which still seems like it's a long ways away, but it'll be here soon. The Kings, as we know, or at least it's been reported that the Kings have worked out Donovan Clingan, and according to reports, again, looks like his draft stock may be rising. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I would be very stunned if Donovan Clingan, if he were to somehow get to the Kings range, that would be an all-time stunner, because it appears his range now at this point is probably going to be number 5 overall, or even number 6 of the Hornets. He's going to be a top 6 pick in this year's draft. He's really showing an improved shooting stroke, which is what a lot of scouts are intrigued by. He's already a great defender, but what if he ends up being a Brook Lopez type offensive player where he's able to stretch it out from the perimeter, give you also a back to the basket feel, and be a dominant rim protector on top of that. And in a year where it really feels like there's no consensus up top, I think he's there. I'd be stunned if he were to fall to 13. I think he's more so in that top 5 range. And if the Kings want to get him, they're probably have to jump teams like the Pistons and the Hornets to make that happen.
Yeah, and there's been some buzz that they might, Evan.
Listen,
I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Hey, Evan, what do you make of the Western Conference going forward next season, and what do the Kings need, in your opinion, to position themselves among those top 4?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because you could realistically make an argument that about 12 or 13 teams next year in the West are going to be competing for a playoff spot. And this is, I think, the deepest this conference has ever been overall, as far as teams all going for it at the same time. And for a team like the Sacramento Kings, where you have such a great roster, in my opinion, I think De'Aaron Fox is an elite point guard. Domantas Sabonis, he's a very underrated star center in this league who can fit in a lot of different places. And then Keegan Murray, I think he's going to develop really well for Sacramento. I think he's going to be a 15 to 18 point per game scorer, bringing great defense, great 3-point shooting. I think you're just missing one more piece to that puzzle, and it's a difference maker type of player. And I've been thinking more and more about the Kings over the last 48 hours. And what I keep coming back to is kind of trying to find that Malik Monk replacement, because all indications are, from what I've heard so far, guys, that Malik Monk is probably going to get an offer that Sacramento cannot get.
Yeah.
It's going to be close to $25 million a year from what I've heard. He might get a $100 million contract for free agency, which is a huge thing for Malik. Congrats to him, the way he's developed his game. But a lot of teams are interested. A lot of teams are intrigued by. He's still only 26 years old, so I think he still has a lot of years left in his prime. So a lot of teams are going to be chasing Malik Monk, and I think the Kings need to go and get that bucket getter that Malik Monk is going to be walking out the door with. And I keep coming back to Kyle Kuzma. I think he might be one of the better fits on the market as far as trade goes. And maybe that 13th pick there, if you don't like anyone there, Washington wants another draft pick. That might be an ideal match for the Kings. So they've been chasing Kuzma now for a couple of years.
That's my trade.
No, it's not.
It is.
No, but you also said they would send us the 2.
Evan, here was, and I said,
listen to this, Evan, and don't try not to laugh too hard, okay? Let's hear this out.
A couple days ago, I said Barnes, Sasha, whatever salaries match and whatever Washington wants, and 2 first-rounders plus the 13th pick for Kuzma and the number 2 pick. And even though it was my birthday at the time, my partner, Kyle Draper, tried to laugh me out of the studio. And it sounds like you are now suggesting a form of that might actually be reasonable.
So I will say to maybe throw a rain on your parade there, the Wizards are not going to be trading the second overall pick this year.
That's what I was saying. That's all I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah, they want to keep that pick. All indications are they're going to draft either one of Alex Sarr or Zachary Richaussier, the two French prospects top this year's draft. They really like both those guys. So if you want to get Kuzma, though, if you want to make it interesting, I've been thinking about potential package for Kuzma that I think is really realistic for Sacramento. Maybe you offer up, let's say, Davion Mitchell, Chris Duarte, your 13th pick, and then you add in maybe one more rotation piece on top of that, plus a future pick down the road. So let's say Vesnikov or Trey Lyles plus Duarte plus Davion Mitchell for your salary filler there. And then maybe you can flip Harrison Barnes into another team off of that because you'll need to get him somewhere else, I imagine, off that deal. But I think that what Washington wants is just salary filler. They want expiring contracts. They want first-round picks. And the Kings, they can offer that. They have the 13th pick this year. They can give them a future pick down the road in 2026, 2027, or beyond that. I think for a team like Sacramento, their time to win is now. I mean, the core with Fox and Sabonis, the time is now. I think you got to push in some of those chips. Me personally, I would go higher than Kyle Kuzma, but I think that might be the most realistic target for them.
All right, Evan Sidery joining us here. All right, he's saying a little higher. Like one guy we've been talking about, Zach LaVine. What's the market for Zach LaVine, and would you see him as a fit in Sacramento?
And could you get something back for taking on his salary?
Yeah, I think that might actually be intriguing. I think LaVine could really actually fill the Malik Monk role, just the polar opposite as far as salary goes, who's making in the mid-40s the next couple of years, which is not appealing, of course, for a team like Sacramento, but he's a 25-point-per-game scorer. He'd be, I think, a great fit with Sabonis. I think he could really help accentuate his offensive game. And I think you might be able to get an asset on top of that for Zach LaVine. If you're willing to take on, let's say, LaVine's contract, maybe one more contract off that Bulls roster, maybe you can take off that plus the salary filler you send back, whatever you want to send back, whether it be Herter or Barnes. And then maybe you can get the 13th pick. Maybe you can swap picks in this year's draft. The Bulls have the 11th pick. Maybe they're willing to move you up 2 spots in this year's draft plus something else on top of that. Take that LaVine contract.
Yeah, Evan Sidery with us from Forbes and the Sporting News. I think the lesson for a team like the Kings right now is you look at Minnesota, you look at Dallas. I want to get your thoughts on who you think is going to win that series, by the way. But both those teams, they made moves. They were all in with the big trades they made, getting Rudy Gobert, getting Kyrie Irving. And then they doubled down last year at the deadline, Minnesota, this year in the offseason. They both doubled down on that. So I think it's pretty clear if the Kings, you either got to tear it down, which they don't want to do. So you got to be all in this offseason. That just seems to make the most sense, Evan.
Yeah, I think the Kings are, like I mentioned, I think they have to be in that window the next 2 or 3 years with Sabonis and Fox. That's their prize. You got to go for it now. And guys like a Kyle Kuzma, another player I think that could hit the market this offseason that might be a little higher than Kuzma. I don't know about his defensive fit because I think you need more defense. Brandon Ingram, I think, will be available this summer. I think he might be a really intriguing fit with the Kings as far as being a scoring type. I think the dream fit, if you're Sacramento, and this is the guy I'd push my chips all in for if I was them, would be Mikal Bridges with the Brooklyn Nets. He's an elite defender. He's a 20-point-per-game scorer. He fit right in with Sabonis and Fox, the third guy offensively. He's a 40% three-point shooter, all-NBA defender. They need defense in Sacramento. They already have the offensive firepower. You need to go out and get an elite defender next to Keegan Murray. If you put Mikal Bridges with Keegan Murray, now you have a really dynamite wing duo right there, and that really fits well next to the other 2 stars there. So if Mikal Bridges somehow became available, I'd give up multiple first-round picks. I'd give up a lot for him.
Why would Brooklyn do that, though, Evan? Sorry to cut you off. Why would Brooklyn trade their best player?
Yeah, I think the reason might be why is because Brooklyn's going to be star chasing this summer. I think a lot of teams are looking at Brooklyn to see what happens if they don't go out and get a Donovan Mitchell, who they want to go out and see. If he doesn't request a trade from the Cleveland Cavaliers this offseason, they'll have to pivot somewhere else. They might pivot to Trae Young, for example. If they can't get Trae Young, who are the Nets going to get in that? And they might have to realize at that point, why not give up Mikal Bridges? I mean, he could give them maybe 3 or 4 first-round picks that he can kickstart a rebuild a little bit in Brooklyn. There's not many pieces in Brooklyn anyways. There'll probably be a top 5 pick in next year's draft too. But the kicker about that is that the Nets don't own their future draft picks because they gave them all up into James Harden. Really in a tough spot here. I think if they're going to try to push those chips in this summer for Donovan Mitchell, but if they don't get it done there, I think they might have to sell off on guy Mikal Bridges.
Catching up with Evan Sidery here. Interesting information. Evan, we have a guy that, he calls sometimes. Sometimes I don't think he believes the things he's saying. And he's saying, the Kings need to go out and get John Collins. I mean, what do you think of a guy like John Collins as a fit for the Kings? I personally am not really in favor of it.
Yeah, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to that. He might be the cheapest option, though. I mean, because the Jazz are going to be putting John Collins back in the trade market this summer. They were listening at the deadline. He's not going to cost you anything. He's going to probably cost you just filler and maybe a second-round pick, if that. I mean, he's a guy that can really fit with Sabonis and Fox. He's a great athlete in transition. Maybe as a chief flyer, he could make sense there. I mean, the Jazz are certainly going to be listening on John Collins.
Yeah,
man, whoever said that must know their basketball. I tell you, Evan, whoever brought up John Collins in Sacramento must know their basketball. That was me, by the way. That was me. I think John Collins would fit in well. Another guy, another team I've been, saying we should keep an eye on, and you tell me your thoughts on this. The Milwaukee Bucks, with Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis. What do you make of where Milwaukee stands, and might they shake things up this offseason?
Yeah, I think they're kind of stuck in where they're going to be. They're going to be over the second apron this offseason. They're going to be really hampered on flexibility on what they can do in trades. I think it's 1 year too early to envision the Bucks kind of blowing it up there. I think if they run it back this next year, if Damian Lillard doesn't do well again there next to Giannis, I think at that point you might see Giannis ask for a trade, but that might be way far down the road there. I mean, Giannis seems very low to the Milwaukee Bucks, but I'd be stunned if we see actual big changes with Milwaukee this offseason.
Hey, Evan, how about it? Who do you think wins the Western Conference Finals and ends up presumably playing Boston for all the marbles?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my prediction I start off with, which was Wolves in 7. But after seeing game 1, I think Dallas has a real chance of winning this series. I think Minnesota's got a real hard time containing both Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. But I think we see the defense win out in the end for Minnesota. I think it's going to be a classic series. So I'll stick with the Wolves in 7. I think we see Boston at this point. Tyrese Halliburton doesn't play due to his injury. I think that they might sweep the Indiana Pacers. So the Celtics probably outweigh whoever wins this Western Conference Finals. So I'll stick with Celtics versus Timberwolves for my finals prediction.
Hey, Evan, we started off our show talking about the Celtics and their easy path to potentially the NBA Finals. How do you view their run when at the end of the day, if they win a championship, that's all that matters. I believe it's one of the easier runs through a conference that we've seen, not just because of the teams, but all the team star players are hurt. Even the guys that they haven't faced, Milwaukee with Giannis banged up, Joel Embiid banged up as well. Even New York not at full strength. I just feel like the East especially is just so banged up. It's like almost who stays the healthiest, who's the healthiest team can get through.
Yeah, that's really all it's about at this point of the year is just a war of attrition as far as injuries goes. And you're seeing, especially on the Western Conference side of things, again, how much stronger, in my opinion, the West is compared to the Eastern Conference. It's the Celtics up top. Then you have maybe a tier below the Bucks and the Sixers, and then maybe another tier below that you have a few other teams. So I think it just really goes to show how easy the East is compared to the West right now. And that's why I think that you might see like a Donovan Mitchell, for example, if he wants to stay in Cleveland and take the $208 million, because I think Cleveland still has a realistic chance the next couple of years if they keep Donovan Mitchell, just because of how light the East is. But Boston is so loaded. I mean, they have one of the best starting fives I've seen in a very, very long time. I think Boston is in a really good position here, quite honestly, to make a run the next 2 or 3 years and kind of be a real serious title contender, maybe win it multiple times.
Hey, Evan Sidery, before we let you go, 2 years ago, the Kings surprised a lot of people. This year, Minnesota, OKC surprised people, although OKC didn't surprise me, but they surprised a lot of people. And I know this is we're getting way ahead of ourselves. Do you see anybody right now where you go, you know what, that team next year, maybe they won't be great, but they might surprise people? And I'm just asking the question, this isn't a prediction, is Detroit an organization we need to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I think Detroit is just based off of, I've heard personally in the last 24 hours that they've had interest in Brandon Ingram as a potential trade. And that's an interesting thing because they have the number 5 overall pick. They have an ownership group that wants to win right now. They were absolutely embarrassed the last couple of years. They have Monty Williams under contract for $60 million the next 5 years after this one. So they're stuck with Monty as their head coach. They got to win and help Cade Cunningham. And I think the Pistons are going to be willing to make a move like that for a Brandon Ingram type of player. So I think the Pistons are going to try pushing the chips a little bit to the middle of the table this summer and try to finally win some basketball games there. I think they might be in the mid-30s wins
Mhm.
if everything breaks right for them next year. But I'd still have a long ways to go for Detroit in that rebuild.
Evan, who's the biggest name to get moved this year?
That's a good one. I will say Donovan Mitchell declines his extension with Cleveland. He will go to a big market, and I will say he ends up with either Miami or he will end up going out west.
Dang. Donovan Mitchell. Whew. All right. That's good stuff right there.
You didn't
That's
say
that.
the Lakers. You know,
I know.
we don't want to hear that. We're not talking about the Lakers, are we?
No, they're going to be certainly an option. I know they can offer the 3 first-round picks all the way through 2031. You're going to see a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, I think, inquire about them too.
Yeah.
I know for sure it's been reported that the Houston Rockets, with all their assets, are going to inquire about Donovan Mitchell. And keep an eye on the Pelicans too. That they are ready to win with Zion. They're going to be willing to offer Brandon Ingram. I think that's a really interesting thing. So Donovan Mitchell, those dominoes, it's going to be set in motion here in the next couple of weeks.
And Evan, how about Trae Young also? I think this is the time that Atlanta finally moves off Trae Young. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think Trae Young, all indications are so far that Trae Young is probably going to ask out of Atlanta just based off of he wants to win now, and Atlanta just got the first overall pick. They're probably going to take one of the French guys up top in this year's draft and try to rebuild. Maybe they keep DeJounte Murray, or maybe they flip him as well. But Trae Young wants to win now. He's been disgruntled the last couple of years in Atlanta. And I still wouldn't rule out tonight the Lakers going for Trae Young or maybe a surprise team. But I think Trae Young's pretty upset with the situation in Atlanta. I would not be surprised if he asked for a trade. So we'll see what happens there.
Evan Sidery, thank you so much. We've taken up far too much of your time. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Anytime. Appreciate it.
All right, Evan,
Thank
good
you.
stuff, man.
Well, if he's right, then, I mean,